talked about the jobs that are going to need reskilling. So I suppose it will continue to exist, but that requires considerable reskilling. The net impact, however, it seems to be negative. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. Although it's a fair assumption from what you said. We chose consciously to avoid a situation to estimate whether there would be net new jobs created or net jobs lost. And I'll tell you why. Because the history has shown, when you go back hundreds and hundreds of years, that every single forecast we have on the impact of technology on jobs has been wrong.
Sure.
So what we've done is we have constructed a labor market model. The labor market model is predicated on the fact that we will only have a certain level of economic output, and that stays the same. So we looked at the total economic output and we said that will stay, let's say that stays the same. How much labor do you need to produce that level of economic output? Once we had that, we can see that the workers that typically are displaced, they typically are showing up in other parts of the labor market because they need to get new jobs, right? There's something called the income effect in economic theory, which is when you make productivity savings, you reinvest that back into projects that generates new income. The new income generates new jobs. Okay? So the net effect in our model is zero, right? That is our assumption, because we didn't want to say 1 trillion jobs will be created, 1 billion jobs, 200 million jobs. You know, it doesn't make sense.
Sure.
Because whatever you put out there would be wrong. But what we wanted to know, and this is the most important part of the study, what we wanted to know is, if these jobs move from A to B, how do we train the workers? Because that is the key question. It's not about whether there are more jobs or less. It's about how do we make sure we create a flexible labor market model so that workers can move to new jobs, even when they're in mid-career. Like in my case, if I wanted to move to another job, I should be able to. We're living longer, we're working longer. We should be able to move from one job to the other. So the flexible labor model is what we're after, and what reskilling governments and private sector needs to do to enable that flexible labor model.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that clarification, Daveen. And of course, we are here in Vietnam, and so I want to ask Thuy, you know, from the perspective of Vietnam and the labor market that it has right now, when you look at manufacturing, for example, right now, actually, experts would say Vietnam is sort of already, if you want to go to Vietnam now, it's too late. All the good workers and all the good manufacturing places are taken. In other words, it seems to be quite okay right now in terms of where Vietnam is in terms of employment. Now, of course, as Daveen said, going forward, we'll see quite considerable displacement. We'll see reskilling is needed, and we'll see new jobs, but also new skills that are needed for those new jobs. Where would you recommend, if you were a policymaker or a business in Vietnam, where would you recommend to focus efforts in order to make the most out of this sort of effect of artificial intelligence?
Yeah. You know, actually, what Naveen sharing about the impact from the AI trends and the impact of job impacts. So for Vietnam, I think Vietnam is not the exception. Vietnam is not the exception. The transformation, you say, is no longer a vision now in Vietnam. So it has become the reality. So from the web, right, from what the Vietnam Prime Minister is sharing, it is a very strong message from him about the digital transformation. And all of the business across Vietnam is now adopting technologies in order to overcome challenges and in order to open new opportunities in Vietnam. So what I can see is people, the investor, the foreign investor, they come to Vietnam. Vietnam is still considered a very attractive destination to Vietnam. And one of the reasons is we have the low-cost labor, right? But the challenge from Vietnam is the low-skill force is like the majority, and we lack of the high-quality and skilled workforce. So that is the challenge. So the advantage of Vietnam nowadays, maybe in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years, is no longer the advantage. So I think, based on the report here, so I can see in the next 10 years, 1.8 million existing job roles will disappear from the Vietnam market. So, and based on the job display and the job created in the next 10 years in Vietnam, we can see that the job display is more than the job that the government, the market is created. So it is a really big challenge from Vietnam. So then I think the government, they need to have some solution. So otherwise it will be the big challenge for the society.
Yeah. Thank you, Tui, for weighing in. And I think there's going to be quite a few questions also from the audience. So I want to give the opportunity now for people in the audience to ask their questions. We've got a microphone over there, and I already see 2 questions. So we'll start with the gentleman over here and then turn to the lady over there. If you will identify yourself and then ask your question.
Good afternoon. I'm from Cambodia. My name is Mohan. The figures you mentioned are shocking. In 10 years, 28 million people will be out of jobs compared to 4.5 million jobs created. What is the basis for you to come to that 28 million jobs displacement figure? And in terms of percentage, it looks small, 2%, 4%, 5%. But in terms of real numbers, it is shocking, 500,000 in Singapore, 1 million plus in Indonesia. So what is the basis for these figures? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to clarify, this is an important point, the jobs displaced and the jobs created in this study are equal. So I'm not saying there will be 28 million jobs less in the future. What I'm saying is that 28 million jobs will move. So jobs that we're currently doing right now may no longer be needed. They will move to other parts of the labor market where 28 million additional jobs will be created. Okay? We're assuming a net zero impact on the labor force because that's the way the model is constructed. It's a labor market model. It's showing where the work is right now and where the work will be in the future. Whether there is redundancies or whether there are layoffs or whether there are people put out of work is a matter for individual companies and for governments to decide for themselves, because they may choose to put in place regulation to protect those workers, for example. But we have assumed that those jobs that are displaced are recreated somewhere else in the whole ecosystem. So it's not 28 million and 4.5. It's 28 million will be displaced, meaning they will move from one place to another. So the question that you asked is, how did you come up with that number? So what we did is we did a sort of a 5-step process. Okay, the first step we did is we evaluated the technology landscape. In the technology landscape, we looked at 15 key megatrends affecting AI, or typically along the lines of AI, right? We then assembled a task force of experts around the world, and we invited them in to look at these 15 trends and paint a picture of how these technology will be actually implemented in their country by 2028. The third step we did is when we saw the impact of that technology by 2028, we calculated the productivity gains that would come from the impact of those technologies. And this is data that's well existing in the US and in other parts of the world. We used economic proxies to figure out what the productivity savings would be. We then calculated the income effect, which means when you save money, you reinvest it and new jobs are created. So we then modeled the income effect on those 6 countries, 21 industries, 430 occupations, and 41 task types.